Chapter 4 HTML Form. Central idea: create HTML form. How does a HTML form work? The elements used in a HTML form: form tag, input tag, different attributes for input tag, use of text field, text area, checkbox, password field, radio button, submit, reset button, etc. with input tag, select tag, the action attribute, the method attribute. HTML form is a document which stores information of a user on a web server using interactive controls. A HTML form contains different kind of information such as username, password, contact number, email ID, address, etc. Do you know how does the HTML form work? User loads the form page in his/her web browser. The browser sends a request to the web server. User fills the form and submits it. The form submission data is sent to the web server. The web server processes the request. A response is sent back to the browser. The elements used in a HTML form are text field, text area, checkbox, input box, radio buttons, list, submit buttons, etc. Using these elements, the information of a user is submitted on a web server. The form tag is used to create HTML form. Input elements in HTML forms. Input elements are the most common elements which are used in HTML forms where the user can enter data. Different user input fields can be created such as text field, checkbox, password field, radio button, submit button, etc. Different attributes for input tag are: type specifies the type input element to display. Input types like text, radio button, submit, etc. Name. The name attribute is required for each input field. If the name attribute is not specified in an input field, then the data of that field would not be sent at all. Size. The size attribute specifies the size in characters for the input field. Value. The value attribute specifies the initial value of an input element. The most common input elements are: label. The HTML label tag is used to add a label to a form control like text, text area, etc. Example: output. Text field. The text field is a one-line input field allowing the user to input text. Text field input controls are created using the input element with a type attribute having value as text. The default width of a text input field is 20 characters. Example: output. Try this. Text area. Text area is a multiple line text input control which allows user to enter text in multiple lines. A text area input control is created using the text area element. Example: output. The rows attribute specifies the visible number of lines in a text area. The calls attribute specifies the visible width of a text area. Try this. Password fields. The password field does not show the characters that the user type in password fields. Instead, the field displays another character such as an asterisk. It allows a single line of text. Password fields input controls are created using the input element with a type attribute having value as password. Example: output. Try this. Radio button. Radio buttons are used to let a user to select exactly one option from a list of many options. Radio button input controls are created using the input element with a type attribute having value as radio. Example: output, try this. Checkbox. Checkboxes are used to let the user to select one or more options from a list of options. Checkbox input controls are created using the input element with a type attribute having value as checkbox. Example: output, try this. Submit reset button. The submit button allows the user to send the form data to the web server. The reset button is used to reset the form data and use the default values. The form data is sent to a web page on the server when the user clicks on the submit button. Example: output, try this. The select element. A select box is also called drop-down box. Select boxes are used to allow users select one or more options from a pull-down list of options. Select boxes are created using two elements which are select and option. The select element defines a drop-down list. The option element defines an option that can be selected. By default, the first item in the drop-down list is selected. Example: output. The size attribute is used to specify the number of visible values. Example: output. The multiple attribute is used to allow the user to select more than one value. Example: output, try this. Note: forms typically have submit buttons. When that submit button is clicked, it will post the data from each input within the form to the action URL provided. A form is useless unless some kind of processing takes place after the form is submitted. The action attribute is used to inform the browser what page or script to call once the submit button is pressed. The action attribute. The action attribute defines the action to be performed when the form is submitted. Normally, the form data is sent to a web page on the server when the user clicks on the submit button. In the example given below, the form data is sent to a page on the server called myactionpage.com. If the action attribute is omitted, the action is set to the current page. The method attribute. The method attribute specifies the HTTP method, GET or POST to be used when submitting the form data. The default method when submitting form data is GET. Example: or. However, when GET is used, the submitted form data will be visible in the page address field. If you use the GET method, the results of your form will appear in the URL box in the top of the browser and name value pairs separated by and. The post method passes information back to another method which does not show on the URL. Post method can be used to send large amounts of data. Form submissions with post cannot be bookmarked. Try this. Output,